This is Rakesh Patel, and you're listening to the EB-5 Fix. Welcome to the EB-5 Fix. My name is Rakesh Patel. With managing partner with the Patel Law Group and immigration attorney for EB-5 investors. We appreciate you tuning in to listen to us. I'm joined here by my colleague and friend, Shay Armstrong. Shay, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everyone, Shay here. I am Shay Armstrong. I am a partner at Bradley's Dallas office, and I'm an EB-5 deal attorney.
Awesome. Well, Shay, we have a special guest with us today. Do you want to introduce our guest?
Oh, wow, yeah. So I've done this a bunch of times now, so I'm pretty good at it. This is Matt, the infamous Matt Gordon. He is New York's finest EB-5 practitioner. He's got an immense experience on the educational side, on the legislative side, on the EB-5 deal side. And so I've worked with Matt for many, many years. We were like-minded in the sense of our lobbying efforts in DC on what we wanted to see, for the most part, happen with the EB-5 program. We saw some of it happen, some of it didn't. But Matt, thanks for joining us, and I'll let you fill in any gaps that I missed on your introduction.
Well, great guys. Thanks for having me today. No, I think you captured it. So I was the M&A attorney from Wall Street, became a management consultant and investment banker, that then stumbled accidentally into the EB-5 world probably about 12, 13 years ago now. And I thought, well, that's an interesting little corner of the finance universe. And so I put together actually my company E3 Investment Group to be a kind of private equity firm consultancy, public policy shop, sort of, because of Shay, focused on EB-5, and have really been doing that since. And it was an interesting walk, starting off becoming the editor of the legal treatise about the EB-5 program published by ILW, and then using that as a springboard to start working with Harvard Kennedy School, the White House. We used to in Congress as well, and all culminating to the testimony in 2016 in front of the Judiciary Committee. And a lot of people, when they look at EB-5 now, they say, oh, there's this walled garden approach, and to these set asides, target employment areas, and actually it also with two of the three guys on this call, me and Shay. So in that original testimony, so it was a great exercise in where the guys with the ideas actually were able to have an impact on the public policy formation cycle. So that was great experience, and just continuing forward.
Well, we appreciate it, Matt, and I feel like I'm here with some EB-5 loyalty. I think last time Shay and I we were on a podcast and we talked about, or Shay showed me some proposed legislation or proposed changes to the rules and the amounts and things like that. I think you and Shay probably worked on that a little bit together, but it was so close to the amounts that we have now. If only people would have listened 7 years ago instead of waiting 7 years later and having all the issues that we've had with EB-5. But once again, we appreciate, Matt, everything that you've done for EB-5 and joining us here. Quick question for you, just as a background, kind of tell us your involvement, your EB-5 projects and prior EB-5 involvement, just maybe some projects that you were involved in and kind of roles that you played, maybe early on and then maybe towards the latter part of the last run of EB-5.
So, when I started getting into EB-5, there were already a number of dominant companies that were doing what I'll call like the cookie cutters, a lot of the real estate deals that look very, very similar. And so I started focusing on kind of the quirky oddball stuff, especially with my background as a corporate mergers and acquisitions attorney from Wall Street. Sophisticated structure is kind of what I do. So I would look at a lot of people and their goals in terms of allowing their projects and their business streams to qualify for EB-5 investment, and was able to come up with structural solutions on the corporate side. So I started, doing lots of different things, everything from, small health clinics to, to auto body shops and everything, in between. So I worked on projects like that, started even working a bit with the investors, and again, from the business law background, was able to work on some very, very difficult source of funds cases. Sometimes I'm even brought in to help after the fact when people don't quite get it right, both on the corporate structuring side or on the investor side. So I kind of work all across the industry, and a lot of times when people say, no, that's a little too hard, not the way we do it, sometimes those guys end up in my shop, and we're able to take it through for them.
So when you say that you worked on both sides of it, is there a side that you enjoyed more, or was it just really different experiences for? Because obviously I work on the investor side, Shay works on the deal side. We both understand each other's side, but we don't get involved with that. So
to a degree, I like the intellectual challenge. So I just had a client call me up, and it's one of these cases. It's the father is in China, the mother is in the U.S. with a 19-year-old son, and the mother's here with a pending asylum refugee status. And so, there's all the interplays of, the child aging out, how it all works with having the family split between the two countries, concurrent adjustment of status. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's a funky one. So it's not your bread and butter sort of case. So those get to be fun. And, we had another sponsor call us up and want to do some work in a kind of student housing management type structure. And these are the ones where there's no business plan that exists for that type of business. So I sit down with them almost like when I was an old management consultant, and you don't just document what the deal is. You ask the question, what could it be? What should it be? And that allows you to explore both the business from a business optimization standpoint, but also from an EB-5 compliance standpoint. And that's really where I kind of fit in the industry, because not a lot of people play on both sides of the equation. And it is very intellectually stimulating, and it's kind of cool, and you get into the, thinking about the policy side of it, and then just how do you accomplish the client's goals.
So, Matt, I want to circle back on more fun times in EB-5. What was that, 2017, I believe, you had the opportunity to testify to the Senate Judiciary Committee on potential EB-5 reforms, and your testimony was incredibly impactful. The party afterwards was even better, but let's stick to the testimony here. We just kind of provide an overview of the reforms that you suggested and maybe which ones were enacted into the actual EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act and which ones weren't.
Sure. So the ones that the ones they listen to, one thing that I tried to get across to the committee was that there are two currencies in EB-5, and it's literally almost a quote out of it: time and money. And the whole purpose, so first of all, the whole testimony was about targeted employment area policy. Is it a failure or is it a success? And the conclusion was it was a resounding failure, because 99% of all money ended up in TEAs, and you could make a TEA anywhere. One time I went over to brief some congressional staff, and I had just gotten Times Square, New York City, designated as a targeted employment area. I don't really think that Times Square needed any additional help to attract development capital. So the purpose of the policy was to steer money and create an incentive for people to invest money in geographical areas that wouldn't have otherwise gotten it. That's the whole purpose of the incentive. So you could get almost any address in America qualified as a TEA. So the policy meant nothing, because the money just went where the developers want. They just got it to sell EB-5 units at a cheaper rate. So I said, if you want to motivate people, you have to do what's meaningful to them. One, there needs to be a meaningful delta in the cost between TEA and non-TEA investments. And two, almost more important, there needs to be a delta in time. And time can really potentially matter. And especially as we now see, you have 4 or 5 year adjudication times for I-526s. Well, now it gets to be really impactful when you say, well, there's potential priority processing on rural-based TEAs. Now, we as practitioners today don't know what that really means. I've had conversations with many people, and they think a year-ish.
Yep.
We're kind of coming up on when that might be.
Well, I was gonna ask you that, because I get asked that question every day. I say, well, what it's supposed to be and what's actually going on, we don't know yet.
Well, I mean, we do know how Expedite works. We started working with them very successfully, and so Expedite really do have some meaningful teeth. We do know that our clients who we're able to get Expedites for, come in between 6 and about 10 or 11 months. And we find the delta there is simply a function of the relative complexity of their source of funds, and that's fair. When you have a team, take your adjudication, just a little But so they are moving with the expedites, but we've seen in the past where EB-5 in general, 526s were supposed to have 6 months adjudication time in the statute, and USCIS routinely blows through those mandates. So will they actually, adhere to the mandate of giving a priority processing to rural-based TEAs? Nobody knows right now.
Do you think, just following up on what you're saying, where legislation has went and where we're at with the Reform Act now, do you think it was a step in the right direction? Do you think there's just more that can be done? I don't want to put you on the spot, but kind of what your thoughts are.
I think, I'm a policy guy, and so I actually recently went back to my own alma mater, Cornell University. They have a new Brooks School of Public Policy, and I came to give some lectures. And we really used EB-5 as a case study of the policy formation process. It worked, so let's look what's going on out there. There's more money flowing into rural and genuine urban high unemployment TEAs than ever before in the EB-5 program.
Yes.
Full stop. The policy's working. Is it perfect? Could it be better? Of course it's not perfect, and of course it could be better. But was it a major step in the right direction? Absolutely. Would I like to see more than $250,000 delta between TEAs and non-TEAs? Yeah, I would. And I remember sitting, with congressional staff at USCIS talking about how much is enough to motivate, and the horse trading that was going on. But it seems to be very motivational to people to save that $250,000. It's very motivational to people to at least have the idea and the promise of faster adjudication times with rural-based TEAs. So right now, I think the policy is working quite profoundly.
Yeah, and Matt, one thing we like to ask our guest is, give us an EB-5 war story. As we know, I think we all love EB-5 because the intellectual challenge involves immigration, private equity, real estate, hopefully not white-collar crime, but other things, right? Economics. So give us kind of one of your favorite stories.
So one of my favorite recent war stories is I was working with a client, and it was kind of during that period where EB-5 was a complete mess, and they regulations had increased the minimum investment quite a bit, and I was going to work with this client actually to do EB-2 investment, and then all of a sudden that nice little judge invalidated the Trump administration rule, and it went back down to $500,000. So I said, you want a green card for pretty much the same amount. So he said, sure, let's do it. And I was actually doing some structuring work with a project that back in the days when, before the regional center program expired for that big gap, that 8 or 9 month gap, they had actually gotten an expedite for their regional center. And so I said,
Wow.
The legal basis for getting an expedite, whether it's the regional center or the investor, is identical. The premise is the same. Each actually have to apply for it separately. But if they give it to one, there's no reason there's no reason why a regional center should get it, and then an investor in that regional center's project shouldn't get it.
What's the premise, Matt, for our listeners?
So these were opioid addiction clinics. Biden administration, right? And they're building these things in Appalachia and low-income areas, like really, really, so creating a tremendous amount of social good and social value. And so they wanted for the regional center. Regional center went away. We restructured everything for this investor to be direct EB-5 back when you could multiple investor direct EB-5s, and then said, okay, let's go to the expedite. And then summarily USCIS rejected the expedite. And that's a non-appealable decision. So we were like, holy cow, how could they do that? That's completely illogical. So everybody rallied their troops. We were able to get Senator Manchin involved. And so he opened a congressional inquiry. And I remember I was actually sitting with my son, and we were visiting Georgetown University, so in Washington, on with Manchin's staff. And I'm like banging on a park bench because I was outside saying, if this doesn't change, people will die. And you don't get to say that a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
Who's investing in opioid addiction clinics in West Virginia? If this money doesn't flow through EB-5, clinics aren't built, people die. And so I was personally really outraged because for the expedite policy, this was the poster child project. Of course it should have been approved, and of course every investor should be approved. So we kind of rallied Manchin's office, got some people in the White House involved, and then was able to convince USCIS that they had a training issue, and they, on their own, sua sponte, reversed an unappealable decision, granted my client an expedite, and then have since granted 100% of the project's clients expedites. So now opioid addiction clinics are being built. So it was a win for the individual client. We moved mountains in very special places. That was a great case study. But it was also a win for America. We are now getting capital flowing into rural districts, creating very, very socially beneficial projects that otherwise wouldn't have happened. And so we're really proud of our work. We did this both for the individual and just part of the overall system.
Well, that's amazing to hear. I mean, when you look at EB-5, that was the purpose of EB-5 when you're looking at it, getting into rural areas, taking job creation, and then on top of that, the benefit to the U.S., the benefit that you're having. So that's great to hear. Let me ask you, just going back on that, what was USCIS's position on why they denied the expedite? I'm just kind of curious.
Oh, you know USCIS didn't tell you.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
We don't know, and they couldn't explain it to Senator Manchin's staff, so I guess they decided it was a good idea to not fight that fight.
Yeah, well, we see that all the time, and we've been getting, as everybody does, you get some RFEs on investor petitions, and they tell you that they want more documentation for source of funds, but they don't tell you what they want. It's an impressive way to operate, but yeah, we do see it all the time.
How many times do you respond to an RFE telling them where in the original conditions we've already given the date?
All the time.
So true.
All the time.
So true.
I guess they skipped those 300 pages, but that's okay.
I think my favorite RFE war story was when they returned a petition to a colleague of mine saying that they didn't have the mailing address, but they mailed it back.
That's impressive.
Oh, that's good.
They didn't have the mailing address.
That's good. That's why you have psychics.
So what are you working on now? Tell me what you're working on now that we've had all the reforms changed and you're in EB-5.
I do a lot. So even the investment group, we do a lot of things. So we're very heavily focused on our private equity work. You guys, I'm sure we all talk about it. It's pickleball now.
Yeah.
So we're doing $180 million worth of indoor pickleball facilities in and around Florida to expand after. And that's actually not we did actually take a couple of E2 investors into subsidiaries of that, so there's some immigration investment bent to that, but generally speaking it's stayed on the pure private equity side. In terms of the EB-5 portfolio, we have a couple of projects we're working with that are doing, a lot of times we're working with projects that are not marketing to third-party investors. It's within close groups of friends, families, so we do a lot of that sort of bespoke work. Where you'll never hear of the projects, you'll never see them, and they do need a high degree of customization. That's not your cookie cutter type thing, which is where it makes a lot of sense for me to get involved. We do a little bit of cookie cutter work too, and then sometimes we just work with investors, especially with our experience in the expedites, when they have these difficult cases where time really matters, especially very, very complex source of funds. I don't get intimidated when it's just crazy kind of stories and complexity and thousands of pages. We tend to focus on that sort of stuff. So, a little bit on the investor side as investor counsel, and then a little bit on the project side, for those.
We're seeing, I think Shay and I are both seeing this, is just in the last 3 months especially, but maybe last 6 months, just this massive increase in interest in EB-5. Obviously, the program being more stable where it's at, it helps. What do you think is causing the spike in interest in EB-5?
Privacy contents have been updated. To continue, review the updated items on your screen.
I think there's a lot of marketing. You remember the regional center program was in hiatus for the better part of a year, and that really killed things. There was a lot of uncertainty and chaos, and uncertainty, as you guys well know, in any legal system is just the death knell. So no one knew what to do. Lack of confidence in the regional center program. They were on the verge of invalidating tens of thousands of applications. So it was a real chaos in the system. And so now the new law that came out last July really helped stabilize things, which was great. But at the same time, you now see the world become a much less stable place. So let's take a look at China, for example. The Xi administration, it is not the same. I have, Chinese American developer clients and deep ties there. The wealthy are genuinely afraid. There's crackdowns against corruption, crackdowns against the wealthy, difficulty in getting money out. It's not business as usual stuff from 5 and 6 and 10 years ago that we were all used to. It is a totally different mandate out there than what's going on in China. And they're really kind of socially reconstructing the country. And a lot of the gains in terms of economic social liberalization that have gone on over the last 20 years are now being unwound. And the newly wealthy class are really afraid. So you're getting that push. Then you see on the European side with the Russian war in and aggression in the Ukraine is causing a lot of fear and uncertainty. I mean, India is always India. There's always a tremendous amount of demand out of India. You're also seeing the Modi administration kind of take a kind of harder line, and especially in the religion aspects of the politics. So we're seeing a lot of demand there. And then I'd say the icing on the cake is the recent layoffs with technology employers have suddenly taken all of these H-1Bs that have just been kind of pushed along for the last decade or two, having no hope of getting green cards, now realizing tying their immigration status to their employment status is a bad idea. And we've been telling them that since my earliest days in EB-5. And now, they're getting laid off and they have, 90 days to get a job. And that's impossible in this market. And their kids are born here, their lives are here, and all of a sudden they may face having to leave the country. So you're getting a lot of interest, just kind of all of these things at the same time. The confluence is fueling the sudden demand.
That makes sense. I mean, that's kind of what we're seeing. And then you add the increase in interest rates in the U.S. from a developer standpoint. I'm looking for cheaper capital essentially. So I think that makes sense.
Matt, thanks so much for coming on, the pickleball godfather of New York and the Southeast. We really appreciate it. You have so much insight. You've been involved in this game, when I say EB-5 and pickleball, for a long time, and so your insights are incredible. I owe you dinner. Last time you were in town, it was one of those events where kids and wife and everyone had the stomach virus, and I canceled on you last minute. It's actually probably my turn to go up to New York and buy you dinner, and that's what I'll do.
That sounds good. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on today, and thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thanks, you.
Matt.
Have a great day. Thank you.